much for being with us. Welcome to Georgia and welcome to our program.
Thank you.
So first of all, media literacy. This is a very interesting discipline, and this is my first question is, what is that about? Why do we need this discipline in contemporary world?
So media literacy is an expanded conceptualization of literacy. For most of human history, being literate meant speaking and listening, and doing so in an effective way, where you could persuade and influence others. And then with the advent of the printing press, literacy became understood as reading and writing. And now with the proliferation of digital media, literacy is expanding again to include the ability to critically analyze messages that come in visual, digital, multimedia form, and the ability to create and produce using those tools as well. So media literacy is an expanded conceptualization of literacy. Like literacy, it involves a receptive component, being able to read and listen, and a productive component, being able to speak and communicate with digital technologies and tools.
In that regard, you mentioned this is expanded version of the literacy. So well-literated person, why he or she needs media literacy?
Today, media literacy is needed for work, life, and citizenship. In the workplace, as you know, most jobs are becoming, the knowledge economy is the area of growth in societies. And so people in knowledge societies need to know how to process the abundance of information that is available at our fingertips. For life, media is such an important part of our leisure time. Most of us spend 2 or 3 hours every day consuming media for pleasure. And our pleasure in media is enhanced when we appreciate a quality film, a beautiful song, a great video game, and we can understand what makes the difference between, a piece of quality and a piece of junk. And of course, for citizenship, media literacy is super important because in this area of information abundance, many different points of view and many different platforms come, messages with ideologies that we might not notice at first. It might just seem funny, and then we realize, it has an ideological message. It's trying to persuade us. And so in order for participation in a democratic society, media literacy is essential to help people sort out the difference between trustworthy information and distrustworthy information, information that has a point of view. Being able to spot that is essential for being a citizen in a democratic age.
I know you know about Georgia and Georgia's society, the problems regarding media literacy. I'm sure you know about the kind of projects about the media literacy. What you can say about it? What is still needed to be done?
So Georgia came to embrace media literacy as part of what we call like the fake news crisis, right? With the spread of disinformation, Russian propaganda, the very systematic influence campaigns, using bots and trolls and all kinds of mechanisms to infiltrate people's minds through entertainment, information, and persuasion. But media literacy is more than just studying the problem of fake news, because media affects every part of our lives. As parents, we are raising children, and media is a very effective babysitter, isn't it? Right? You hand the child a tablet and you are free. You can go away for hours. But there are problems associated with parenting using media. And we recognize that in terms of children's attention spans, in terms of their values, in terms of their self-esteem and their beliefs, and then, of course, in their social interactions, their ability to have meaningful friendships. So a 15-year-old boy who is only interacting with other children through a video game, this is not a healthy part of human development. So parents and teachers recognize that media offer many benefits to helping children become effective communicators. But there are harms to consider as well.
Yes, and as I know, the media literacy is a part of the education system in many countries, especially in the US and even in our country and in European countries and etc. So that means that we are we managed to somehow to bring the media literacy to the wider society, wider audience. But on the other hand, the observation of the, how to say that, the users of the different platforms and etc., it brings me ideas that the major audience, they do not really want to distinguish the products, and they just find searching for entertainment, and on the ideological side they try to find their own ideology in that they do not want to find the different vision, different views, and etc. So what we are giving them with the media literacy, they don't need it somehow.
You are directly describing an attitude that comes from academic culture. Because many of us went to university, college, and we were kind of taught that information had a hierarchy. There was literature at the top, and then way down at the bottom was media. And so many of the people who are now running education institutions have these hierarchical ideas about media that leads them to dismiss YouTube influencers, to dismiss popular documentary filmmakers, to dismiss bloggers. And this is not critical thinking about media at all. It's a very shallow and superficial understanding. So a big part of our approach to teacher education is helping disrupt those hierarchies and help people see quality more like the branches of a tree. You know, there can be a quality comic book. There can be a quality meme, a quality podcast, right? And that when we shift our thinking about quality media, it opens up much more possibilities for lifelong learning. And that's a really important thing, because the learning that you do in school is only a tiny, tiny segment of the learning you're going to need to do for your whole life.
And how much can we compete with the mass? I mean, you see the quality on one hand, but on the other hand, there is a big mass of unqualified and low quality media products and etc. Where is our competition?
Well, the concept of quality is definitely shifting, right? We used to understand credibility, for example, as simply a matter of expertise. If you had the right title, if you had the right knowledge, you were an expert, you could be trusted. But we see right now that expertise is more distrusted, right? And we see that influencers, people who speak with charisma, people whose background and identity is similar to us, they seem more believable sometimes than experts. And so if people are not aware of this, I would say, like dialectic between expertise and authenticity, then they might be easily tricked by an influencer. But the same is true the other way. If experts are not sensitive to the relational components of being an effective communicator, nobody will pay any attention to them. So authenticity and authority come together in the way we think about quality today.
Yeah, but authority and authenticity. So this is really very interesting how to find, because we are living in the contemporary world where authorities are ruined. A lot of authorities are ruined, and even more, there are a lot of kind of influencers who are talking about against authorities. So they are saying that you don't need authority. You are yourself, your selfish attitude toward the surrounding is right, is correct, and etc. So you don't need an authority. What are we doing in that regard?
Well, so both of those positions are extreme and wrong, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? I might not be able to understand the big words that come out of an expert's mouth about certain topics related to health, right? But when someone explains it to me mother to mother, I can understand better. And I can apply my critical thinking skills both to the influencer and to the expert. That's why we sometimes say that media literacy is best defined as asking critical questions about what you watch, see, and read.
But again, you're talking about yourself, but we are talking about youngsters. So young people who really like to be kind of free, kind of, how to say that, egoistic and etc. So they like this kind of talk that they don't have authorities. They are against their fathers, mothers, and etc. and lectures and everyone. So this is kind of, and they are in the age when they are voting, where they are starting to participate in politics. So, and could somehow, I don't know, media literacy help these people?
Great question. So one of the best pedagogies for teaching media literacy to adolescents is to have them make their own media. And of course, kids are doing that now, here in Tbilisi and all around the country, right? They are making TikTok videos, they are making dance videos, they are making short videos about skating or whatever. It turns out that you learn a lot by making media because you recognize that you're always making a choice. You're always making choices, where to put the camera, what to say in front of it, what language to use, right? So media literacy competencies can develop as kids feel empowered to have a voice. And that's why that's the most significant part of media literacy for adolescents, helping young people build the confidence to have an opinion, to form an idea, and to express it using language, image, multimedia, and more.
And that's again in touch with the social media, where these people you mentioned have a kind of opportunity to talk about different kind of stuff and to point to how to say that, to represent and to spread their ideas, to their opinions and etc. But in many cases, their point of view, their opinion is a kind of, how to say that, they have a lackage of the competence in many fields they talk about. So, and the social media is full of this kind of stuff, full of this kind of information with the lackage of the competence. So what is that? Do we believe that they will grow up? And they will learn something.
Absolutely. And just think about it in your own experience, right? So when you stumble across a YouTube video and you look at it, and maybe it's a cooking demonstration, maybe it's a how-to video, maybe it's just a silly thing, right? You can read the threaded discussion underneath that YouTube video and see that even though all these viewers watched the same video, they all have very different interpretations of it. And we can read in that thread critical thinking about folks who say, oh no, you got it wrong here, or that's bad advice, don't do that. So there is this recognition in this culture that no one has the exact right understanding of everything, and we're all participating together to try to figure out how the world works and how to tell our stories. And we have to participate in order to get the benefits of this new kind of attention economy, this new way of sharing knowledge. It can be used to polarize people, and there are a group of conflict entrepreneurs who have figured out how to profit from conflict. And yet, even as that is such a big problem all around the world, we are also able to recognize it. And once we can recognize it, then we can resist it, right? It's when we're unaware of the economic context that makes conflict, stirring up conflict, more profitable than promoting harmony, then we can make some choices. How we choose to allocate our attention is going to define the future of our society.
So I would like to go back a little bit to the ideologies you mentioned and different perspectives. And here you mentioned the Polarized Society, here you mentioned how the world works. And if we are observing the traditional media and the social media somehow, I mean, there are some kind of restrictions within the Facebook and etc. to express yourself and etc. about hate speech or something like that. And sometimes it's really not not clear what is the hate speech in the Facebook or something like that. But anyway, this is more diverse picture of the world on the social media. On the contrary, with the traditional media becomes more and more polarized and more partisan.
Right.
So is it a mistake from the traditional media, and whether it is kind of, could it bring to decline of its audiences time after time regarding the traditional media, this attitude, this polarization and this partisanship?
You know, it probably is different in every cultural context. For instance, in Germany, trust in traditional media is still very high. 80% of Germans trust their mass media.
Yeah.
In the United States, it's very low. Only 20% of Americans trust their mass media. So each country has its own trajectory around how polarization has emerged. Here in Georgia, you have your own unique trajectory for why polarization is high. In the United States, polarization has been going on for more than 40 years, right? And it's resulted really from an interplay between media and politicians. Because you see, to catch attention, conflict is very good. And saying something harsh about the opponent gets you more airtime, gets you more media coverage than consensual, democratic, consensus-based decision-making. So this relationship between media and politicians has kind of helped create the polarization we see now. And I think only as politicians and journalists form new kinds of relationships will that polarization begin to diminish. But it's complicated because politicians spend millions of dollars to subsidize media industries during the election process. So that's partly why I think I have some optimism about the future of digital media to disrupt that that dialectic relationship between politicians and media companies.
But there is a problem about the digital media as well. I mean, we remember this kind of cases regarding using the personal information during the elections, which we are collected in the different platforms. And actually, again, this that users, which are commodity for the platform owners, etc. So, and they are selling this information to not just to the market players, but also the policy makers and political parties and etc. So, does it mean that the digital platforms are moving forward to become the traditional media as well?
Oh, absolutely. They're already there. Facebook, Google, they are already ruling the world, and the traditional media platforms are left in the dust. That's partly why we're so excited to see regulatory solutions starting to emerge. You know, in the United States, we are slow to regulate media because of our strong First Amendment. Yeah. Media regulation is always the last option in the United States. So we were thrilled when when the EU passed the GDPR, the whole world benefited from increased privacy protections. We benefited in the United States from that regulation. And all over the country, all over the world now, new approaches to media regulation are occurring as platforms can be restricted, like in Australia with the News Bargaining Code. Australia mandates that journalists receive a payment when Facebook or Google rebroadcasts the work that you, the journalist, created. This law, we won't know now, but in 3 or 5 years, we'll know whether this law was effective in increasing the quality of journalism available to Australians. So I have some optimism. We're not going to figure it out right this minute. But in the next 3 to 5 years, new regulatory strategies will help contain the power of digital platforms and ensure that they fulfill the obligation to serve the public interest.
But sometimes there are concerns that regulations are made by the one part of the policymakers. And that means that and other players of the politics, they are restricted from kind of platforms, kind of, for instance, on a Facebook, and they're allowed to be on a Twitter, and etc. So, and again, this is also very polarized. One people who are more liberal, they are getting to the Facebook, and others are more conservatives, they are getting to the Twitter, and etc. So, and the social media is also polarizing right now.
Absolutely. This is the reality right now. The rise of cancel culture and the rise of content moderation strategies that might be politically biased. These are the two most important things that are happening on the platform now. I think in the absence of effective regulation, these are strategies. We're experiencing them right now. Each one has some advantages and disadvantages, but in general, I think part of what I've come here to Georgia to talk about is the idea that media literacy is evolving, right? You have experienced it in the context of fake news. In the United States, the media literacy movement goes all the way back to the 1970s with violence on television, right? And so media literacy will continue to evolve because people need to understand how media operate. They need to know about the economics of Google. Google and Facebook seem free to people, but most people don't really understand why they're so wealthy, why they have so much money. People don't understand the relationship between politicians and journalists. More clarity and transparency on that is going to be good for everyone here in Georgia and around the world.
Yes, and around the world. Finally, I would like to go to the worldwide, the globe, which is, we talked about the local societies which are polarized, but we are observing right now the extreme polarization of the globe. On one hand, this so-called the global south, and on the other, the Western community. And this polarization and bias is growing and growing, especially after the war in Ukraine, and now after the war after this new phase of the conflict in Israel. So this is kind of, again, these conflicts make the countries, for instance, to join around one idea against someone. So, and the medias in these countries are becoming more and more biased. We knew that the Russian media or Chinese media and etc., they were quite biased, they were quite one-sided, but we are observing that the Western media is becoming extremely biased, especially regarding the foreign policy, regarding the global affairs and etc. What could be the solution in this regard? Because it means that we are making our societies inside the different countries to live in a kind of vacuum of information.
You have identified an important problem that people around the world are struggling with and trying to address. Earlier this spring, I was in Brazil. And I've been to Brazil many times. Since the 1990s, Brazil has developed a media literacy community. Journalists and educators, politicians, people in this public service fields. But only this year, after their terrible anti-government extremism, which looked very similar to what we experienced in the United States on January 6th, the violent extremism and anti-government activism we experienced. Brazil's President Lula, his first official act was to create a new cabinet-level position called Digital Services. This minister is responsible for addressing the extreme inequalities of access to digital services, which is a profound problem in Brazil's huge and multicultural society. This minister is responsible for working with the Department of Education to integrate media literacy, not as a course or an elective, but as part of education for every year that a child is in school. And this minister is also responsible for finding strategies to promote lifelong learning. And that is in part through what the role of the television stations can do. So I was at Globo. Globo, big Brazilian broadcaster, has a media literacy show for grown-ups, right? So there's a lot that can be done when we understand that we have a need to use the power of media, right, for what good it can do. Solving the problem of depolarization is part of the problem, but seeing this as a systemic kind of change that has to come along with reducing the inequalities of access to information, entertainment, and persuasion.
And finally, my final question about media literacy in this global polarization. So what does it mean if you are literated in a media way, you're literated, but you are restricted with an access to an information? Because on one hand, we know that the Facebook and many Western platforms are restricted in China, but on the other, TikTok is restricted in many Western countries. So this is kind of, if you have no access to the information, what does it mean to be literated in this?
It's interesting because with so much information, one of the most literate things that I can do is make good choices. If I make poor choices based on something that attracts my emotion, something that looks interesting, if I make poor choices, I feel the consequences. But when I take the time, consider my own positionality, and make better choices, I reap the benefits.
Professor Hobbs, thank you so much for being with us, and good luck with your lecture today.
Thank you again.